Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Rami Meisami, and I am back here to talk to you about two countries very different than the ones that we talked about in the previous segment. We are going to be talking about India and China. And it is my pleasure to have two guests with me whom I have met right here in Pembroke, Mr. Nick Arena and Dr. Jim Fredericks. I'm going to ask them to give a brief introduction to themselves and their backgrounds, and then we will start. Nick?
My name is Nick Arena, and I'm the MBA Program Director at UNC Pembroke. I've been with UNC Pembroke for about 5 years, and before that I was in business in the area, and I am a UNCP graduate with an MBA degree.
I'm Jim Frederick. I've been teaching economics here at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke for about 25 years. I've got courses in international economics and comparative economics.
Okay. Nick spoke with all of you about his experiences doing business with China. And Jim talked to you all about the economy and culture of India and China both. So I have my trusty iPad here, and I'm going to ask some questions, and let's just keep it informal, and I would like to hear your opinions. Let me start with you, Nick. In your opinion, what are some of the reasons that China has had such a great economic success in the past decade or two?
Well, in the last several decades, the first reason I'd say is because they decided to open the markets after having them closed for about 20 years.
Okay.
So they had this pent-up supply, I guess you would say, and the supply was of people. And they have a very low wage cost, very low cost base, and they were able to attract manufacturing, particularly to southern China, which I'm familiar with, and that's had a big impact on their economy. That's the biggest reason I can think of.
Okay, so let me just follow up on that. Are they going to be able to continue this, or do you see any obstacles to that success?
Well, I think at some point they will reach the mature stage for this manufacturing model that they have, and they realize that. And the Chinese population, though, as they have more money to spend, will start becoming more of a consumer economy. And as that happens, the economy will continue to flourish. So I do see it slowing down a bit, the pace that they had, but I don't see the economy really slowing dramatically.
Okay, that's very interesting. Now, India happens to be the other giant in Asia. Let me ask you the same questions, Jim. Why do you think, or what have been some of the reasons that India has been so successful in recently years?
Well, I think one of the main reason that India has been successful was the results of the financial crisis in 1991, when the IMF came in and imposed liberalization on the country. So unlike the Chinese case, where the idea was more developed inside China, in the case of India, they had liberalization, westernization kind of imposed upon them. So that was a strength. It was good that it happened, and I think it's been good that they've been modernizing and, well, say, liberalizing their economy, reducing the amount of regulation in their economy. But the other side is that you kind of have to wonder whether they really want to continue that. And I think there are some power blocks inside India that really don't want to see much more of a market economy. They want to see the old traditional regulated system persist and maintained.
Very interesting. So you answered my other question, which was, is there something that is going to contribute to the stopping of that success? Now, both countries, you are quite correct, both countries were closed countries not too long ago. And it was very interesting that one country decided to open up based on internal decisions, and the other country opened up based on international pressures. So that's very interesting way to see two paths toward the same goal, which at the end is economic growth. Right, so let's talk about doing business in these countries. I am sure there are differences between how we do business here with each other and how we do business with our Chinese partners, trading partners. So Nick, can you say something about that?
Sure. My first experience in China was in southeastern China, adjacent to Hong Kong, an area that the businesses are primarily dominated by Hong Kong entrepreneurs who've been dealing with the Western world for a long time. So in that part of the country, they had a process in place to assist Western companies bringing business into China. And the cultural differences were there, but they weren't as dramatic as when you move further north, even just to, say, Ningbo, Shanghai, and as you go on up to Beijing, then it becomes much more pronounced, the cultural differences, and how that impacts the way you do business. But as I said before, in southern China, it's much easier for a Western business person to adjust. Some of the big differences, though, are that the people that work in the businesses are not from that area. They've migrated there. And so the plants are more than just a factory. They have dormitories, and they have eating facilities and recreational facilities, and the people live there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and with a very brief, maybe 2 to 3 week period of time off for the Chinese New Year.
Okay. Let me move to asking similar question, not exactly the same, about India. Now, India is known to us for outsourcing. The fact that these days, sometimes when you pick up the phone and call customer service, you get somebody in India. Is that the way that we do most of our business with India, or is that, how is business done between the US and India? What are your opinions on that?
Well, certainly the ease of communication that came with the internet has had a big impact, and the information technology businesses are one of India's growth industries, and they have good universities, and they have a well-educated technical labor force, and so yeah, that certainly is one of the growth areas in India. But we also do a lot of trade in goods with India. And so just the normal kind of trade relations that we see with other countries, we also have with India. Now, of course, doing business with India, one of the advantages is that a lot of them speak English. It's an old British colony, and even a lot of the legal forms are familiar to Americans because they're based on the British common law as opposed to a civil code or some other kind of legal system.
Okay. Just like we talked about in the cases of Malaysia and Singapore, the language or the language barrier becomes very important in international trade. So thank you for bringing that up. It's interesting. Let me talk a little bit about more difficult situations. Jim, there is the caste system in India, which we talked extensively at other points in the course. Has that affected the development of Indian economy?
I think it has. Discrimination on the basis of caste, a person's caste, is illegal, has been illegal for a long time in India. But that doesn't mean that those kind of patterns don't still occur. That, just like with racial discrimination in the United States, which is of course illegal here too, but you still see those kinds of patterns. And to the extent that people are channeled into occupations and kept out of other occupations for which they might be well qualified, very productive in those occupations, then the society as a whole doesn't have as much output. The society could be more productive if those people were allowed to enter occupations where they could succeed and do well. So yeah, I do think it has an impact. Also, I think that for the economy as a whole, just being more open raises the overall income of the whole country.
Okay, Nick, I want to put you on the spot and ask a tough question as well. These days, a lot of the discussion that we have about China's human rights and especially the situation in Tibet. And have you seen, read, heard anything about that situation?
Well, when you're there doing business, you don't hear anything about that. The news is controlled quite a bit. In fact, on my earliest trips, which go back about 15 years, a little less than that, you couldn't even get U.S. TV, you couldn't get any news from the Western world, and even though the hotel said you have the internet service, you really didn't because you never could connect. Today, it's more open. You can still get national news, but you notice that large segments get blacked out. So you suspect that maybe there's something that the government doesn't want you to see. So it just really doesn't come into play while you're there. And the things you're talking about have been, up until recently at least, in parts of China that are dramatically removed, geographically removed from where the business is done. Mm-hmm. So there hasn't really been, from what I've seen, much concern. It just was not a factor for us. You mentioned human rights, and the human rights issues that we had to deal with as a manufacturer were making sure that the people that worked in the factories and built our products were treated in a humane way. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned before that they lived there, they ate there, they didn't have the same freedoms we have to come and go. But on the other hand, these people did migrate voluntarily to this area, and in the course of all this happening, I think the number I've heard is 400 million people, more than the whole population of the United States, have been raised above the poverty line, from below the poverty line. So I think we can't always say that they have to do it our way, mm-hmm. that they're going to have their own way, and as long as their way is a reasonable way for both parties, then I think we have to understand that it is going to be different.
Okay. And of course, India has had some territorial issues also as well. In the south, the Tamils with Sri Lanka, but the one that seems to concern us quite often is the tense situation between India and Pakistan, mm-hmm. Which has led to a nuclear arms race. Is that something that we should be worried about?
Well, yeah, I think anytime we have countries getting arms or getting more arms, nuclear arms, I think this is something the whole world needs to be concerned about. And it's not just not just India and Pakistan, but countries all around the Middle East, around the world, certainly. And well, one thing that concerns me is that the government in Pakistan seems to be weakening, falling apart, and tribal leaders are able to exercise more control in Pakistan as the central government falls apart. And I really worry about what's going to happen if tribal leaders manage to get their hands on nuclear weapons. I think it is a concern.
Okay, thank you. Of course, India has typically called, well, it is the world's largest democracy, and it is a democratic country. It's a very diverse country as well. I have traveled to both countries, more in China, but they are both fascinating places. As usual, I'm going to recommend to everybody who gets an opportunity to travel to these countries and just see it firsthand themselves. Personal experience means a lot. And let me get to the unenjoyable part of my job, which is to bring it close to the discussion. I know it's very interesting and we would like to continue. I would recommend everybody to go back and read some of the PowerPoints, listen to some of the narrations that we had. For example, the situation with India and Pakistan is something that had started earlier, and China was involved. It's a territorial issue. And there is an interconnect between various countries in Asia, whether it's Southeast Asia, Malaysia and Singapore, or whether it's North Asia, China, or South Asia, India. There is an interconnectivity between them. And to really understand one, requires understanding the others. It has been a pleasure to be involved with the Transformation of Asian Economies course, and this is the wrap-up of the course. So thank you for being here. Thank you for having been in the course, and I will see you the next time. Thank you.